Hello everyone, and welcome to Anime Octopus. I'm glad to have you here on the channel, where we dive deep into the world of anime through original fanfics, theories, and creative storytelling. Today's episode is part 3 of our fanfic series. What would happen if Naruko had a guardian? Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. All content on this channel is created purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage featured. Full credit and rights belong to the original creators and copyright holders. Now, let's jump right in and see where the story takes us. The intruders crept through the grand estate with silent precision. Cloaked in shadows, they moved with purpose, carefully scanning the halls for their objective. Once they'd confirmed the ground floor was clear, they separated, one heading upstairs to continue the search for the diplomatic guests, while the other descended in hopes of finding their missing teammate. Hidden in the dim space between a ceiling beam and the wall, one of the infiltrators watched quietly as a young kunoichi from the land of Earth passed below. The girl yawned as she walked, unaware of the figure descending behind her. The infiltrator reached for a tool from her belt and moved swiftly, but the target vanished in a puff of smoke, replaced by a decorative table. The girl had anticipated the ambush. "There's an intruder," the young shinobi called out, dashing down the corridor. The infiltrator gave a quiet sigh of disappointment, retreating in hopes that her partner remained undetected and could still accomplish their mission. Sprinting through the hallway, she narrowly avoided two curved blades slicing down from an open doorway. She deflected them with her dagger as she slid beneath and continued running, hoping to divert the defender's attention. Kurotsuchi sprinted toward the disturbance, her senses alert. Her clan techniques were too volatile to use indoors, so she was left with only her basic skills. As she rounded a corner, she collided with the fleeing infiltrator, who used their momentum to hurl her back into her teammates. The three genin landed in a heap just as the sound of shattering glass echoed down the hall. The intruder had escaped through a window. They scrambled to their feet and rushed outside, just in time to see the members of Team 9 engaging the rogue ninja. The infiltrator stood calmly between the 6 genin, her expression unreadable behind a mask. The young shinobi launched into action, but their opponent danced between their strikes with graceful ease. The lack of coordination between the two teams made it easy for her to create confusion. She sent one of the genin tumbling into another before moving to strike. Kurotsuchi, momentarily vulnerable, could only watch as the masked woman moved closer, blade raised in a swift, calculated motion. Her heart pounded, there was no way to avoid it in time. Clang! The genin froze as Naruko appeared between Kurotsuchi and the masked figure, gripping the intruder's weapon with steady hands. Her bright blue eyes glinted with quiet resolve as she held firm. The attacker leapt back, abandoning the blade. What followed was less a fight and more a fluid exchange of motion, Naruko and her opponent twirling around one another, trying to land a strike, neither able to gain the upper hand. After a tense flurry of movements, Naruko finally managed to push her palm into her opponent's chest just as she herself was struck hard in the ribs, sending her flying backward. The watching genin prepared to jump back in, until the familiar sound of mechanical rumbling filled the air. Relief washed over Kurotsuchi. Their sensei had arrived. Han landed with commanding force, standing tall where the masked figure had just been. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" he asked with calm authority. The masked woman tilted her head, voice muffled by her gear. "You'll know soon enough." Before Han could take another step, she vanished, disappearing into the night as if she had never been there. "Ooh. You let her get away." "We let her go? Your team's lack of cooperation made it impossible to subdue her. Please, the second you tried to face someone of that skill alone, the outcome was obvious." "Neji-san has a point," another replied gently. "Your lack of teamwork gave our opponent many opportunities." "Excuse me? That outfit of yours and those intense eyebrows were more distracting than anything else. And at least our sensei showed up to help." Naruko sat quietly on the roof outside their quarters, listening to the argument below. Tsunade, Guy, Anko, and Han had gone to reassure the clients and promise that Naruko would assist with repairs. She hoped that would reduce the tension between the two teams. Her thoughts were interrupted by a presence landing beside her. "Sorry about them," Kurotsuchi said, settling down next to her. Naruko smiled and shook her head. "Why did you save me?" Kurotsuchi asked after a moment, curious. Naruko blinked. The question seemed so strange. Wasn't that what anyone would do? Kurotsuchi sighed. "Right. I forgot you don't talk much. I must seem pretty odd choosing to talk with someone who hardly speaks over my own team." "I can talk," Naruko rasped. Kurotsuchi's surprise made her laugh. "Then why all the silence?" "It's just easier." Talking loudly hurts sometimes, Naruko explained softly. Kurotsuchi nodded, then returned to her earlier question. So, why did you save me? Naruko leaned back and looked at the stars. A lot of reasons. Mostly because when someone needs help, you help them. But we're from different villages. Our nations could become enemies. Not right now, Naruko replied simply. These talks are about partnership. If our countries work together, there's less reason for conflict. So you're a hopeful idealist, Kurotsuchi teased. Naruko chuckled. Maybe. But also, you're the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. If something happened to you, your grandfather would never trust Konoha again. And Han-ni would be upset. Han-sensei? Sad? Kurotsuchi gave a short laugh. He barely tolerates us. Maybe so, Naruko said gently, but I think when he's with you all, he doesn't feel quite so alone. Kurotsuchi didn't argue. Words weren't always enough to change hearts, after all. Why don't you dislike us the way your teammates do? Naruko asked. Kurotsuchi lay back beside her. Komaro's from a civilian family that blames Konoha for a lot. Osada's clan suffered heavy losses during the war. I love my village, but I want to lead it differently one day. Letting go of old hate might be the first step. Naruko smiled and sat up, extending a hand. Then as the future Hokage, I promise to help both our villages find peace. Kurotsuchi laughed. That was the cheesiest thing I've ever heard. But she took Naruko's hand and squeezed it with resolve. And as future Tsuchikage, I'll do the same. They shared a grin, full of unspoken understanding. I think the arguing's finally stopped, Kurotsuchi said, stretching. I'm off to bed. Night, Naruko dono. Good night, Naruko whispered, watching her go before closing her eyes and slipping into the quiet of her mindscape. She passed through the gates of the seal, greeted by the peaceful aura of her inner world. A comforting presence surrounded her, and moments later, the warm, familiar voice of her guardian spirit, Kurama, welcomed her. You know, one day you'll have to face what they represent. I know. But for now, can I stay here? Kurama's tail gently wrapped around her, lifting her to his snout. Of course, kid. They walked together, quietly enjoying the calm. Suddenly, the peaceful forest faded, replaced by a softly lit, quiet space. So, my instincts were right, a calm voice said. Naruko looked down. Standing below was Han. She jumped off Kurama's snout and greeted him with a bright smile. Han-ni. What are you doing here? I sense something familiar about you. It seems that you, like me, are a Jinchuriki. I've brought us into a kind of shared mental space. It's where Jinchuriki and tailed beasts can communicate peacefully. What I don't understand is why you maintain such a strong bond with the others. What are you talking about, Han-ne? Naruko asked with a smile. I care deeply about the people around me. They make me happy. But surely you realize that if they discover your full truth, they may not accept you? Maybe, Naruko said thoughtfully. But some already know and still treat me with kindness. And besides, Dad here would never leave me. He's always with me. Han narrowed her eyes, glancing between the cheerful girl and the great fox beside her. Well, this is quite the sight, came a deep voice from behind Han. I must admit, sister, I didn't expect you to behave like Shukaku, trying to sway your host with sentiment. A heavy thump echoed through the mindscape as a majestic, horse-like creature stepped from the shadows. It was smaller than Kyubi, yet still impressive. Kyubi gave a soft growl at the suggestion of manipulation, but Naruko waved it off and stepped forward calmly. She passed Han, walking toward the Gobi without hesitation. Unlike her father, who could stand freely in this space, the Gobi was held back behind large mystical bars, similar to what Naruko remembered from her first meeting with Kyubi. Han watched silently, surprised by how confidently Naruko approached the five tails. She stopped in front of the barrier, and to the amazement of both the tailed beast and her fellow Jinchuriki, Naruko gave a respectful bow. Thank you for watching over your Jinchuriki and doing your best through the years. Kyubi observed proudly as her daughter extended such heartfelt gratitude to a being who, while not as powerful, still held great presence. Both the Gobi and Han were momentarily speechless, even after Naruko turned and walked back to Kyubi, giving a cheerful wave before gently fading back to her personal mindscape. Finally, the Gobi broke the silence. It seems we both have remarkable partners. Han nodded thoughtfully, returning to reality. She stood on the rooftop, watching Naruko as she slept peacefully. I'd like to know more about you. Little sister. Ooh. The following day began just as energetically as the last had ended. Naruko and Kurotsuchi did their best to keep peace between the two Jinan teams, managing only a fragile truce. Though the teams stopped arguing for the moment, Naruko knew the tensions hadn't been resolved. As soon as their instructors re-entered the room, the conflict resumed in full. Tsunade, already worn out from a long night explaining events to their clients and attempting to delay important meetings, wasn't in the mood for petty squabbles. Hoping for some rest and time with her student, she released a wave of presence so strong it caused even seasoned kunoichi like Anko and Guy to tense up. Han appeared calm but clearly recognized the force behind the display. The young ninja were startled, many gasping under the weight of the atmosphere. Only Naruko stood still, quietly watching with a thoughtful expression. Satisfied that she had their attention, Tsunade allowed the pressure to fade. Now that the interruptions are over, let's begin. Tsunade-sama, Tenten said, still recovering from the pressure. We intercepted the intruder when she tried to escape through the window, but due to some difficulties, she glanced at the Iwa team, we were unable to detain her. Naruko was the only one who landed a hit before Hansan arrived, which caused the intruder to flee. So she got away? One of the Jinan asked hesitantly. Tsunade turned to Naruko. You managed to land a strike? She asked. Naruko nodded. Tsunade smiled slightly. Good. That means our preparations are working. But we lost our lead, Komuro said. That was expected, Anko replied calmly. If this person was anything like the last one we encountered, they're likely very skilled. 6 young ninja who aren't cooperating properly won't be able to match that level easily. The Jinan teams looked visibly unsettled. Lee's shoulders sagged, and Kurotsuchi furrowed her brow in thought. Anko-san, does this mean there were multiple intruders? Kurotsuchi asked. Anko nodded. Naruko and I saw them entering from the roof. Tsunade-sama, Guy, Han, and I met the second one, who had silenced our earlier prisoner to prevent any more information from being shared. We managed to injure her before she rejoined her partner. Why didn't you stop her? Osada blurted. Now we don't have any clues. Anko's eyes narrowed slightly, but before she could respond, a subtle pressure filled the room. Osada went quiet instantly as Naruko stepped forward, eyes focused, her special dojutsu glowing gently. You should be more respectful when speaking to your superiors, she said quietly. Especially when you're a guest in their village. The pressure made Osada drop to his knees. The other Jinan began to sweat, overwhelmed by the intense focus in the room. Anko, though curious, gently placed a hand on Naruko's shoulder. That's enough, Naruko. They understand now. The pressure eased, and Osada stood shakily. Han offered Tsunade a slight bow in apology, but she waved it off. To answer your question, Tsunade said, we let them go on purpose. Just as we let them reach the prisoner. Why do you think it took Han a while to assist you? Kurotsuchi's eyes widened. She looked to Naruko. You placed a tracking seal. Naruko rubbed the back of her neck. Sort of, yes. Indeed, Tsunade confirmed. Naruko created special seals that allow her to quietly transmit sound from a distance without being noticed, unlike typical transmitters. She pulled out 2 scrolls and unrolled them, revealing complex sealing patterns. As she activated them, soft voices could be heard, conversations from the 2 intruders' current hideout. Impressive, Tenten breathed. I've never seen a seal like this. These are modified versions of the seal Naruko uses to speak selectively, Tsunade explained. With them, we can learn about the plans and affiliations of our opponents. The next week was spent with Team Han and Team Guy rotating duties, guarding clients, watching the gates, inspecting new arrivals, and intense training. Naruko deployed her shadow clones to keep watch across the estate, while she split her time between training, relaxing with Anko as they monitored the receiver seals, or occasionally communicating with the clients through Tsunade. Hiro Morimoto, the estate owner, was a scholarly elder who quickly grew fond of Naruko's love of books and learning. He gladly gave her access to his vast library, filled with ancient scrolls and texts. He listened intently to her stories, especially tales of her adventures, such as her time in the Land of Waves. When she spoke of how Tsunami was now managing Gato's old companies, both Hiro and Kota, a guest from the Land of Earth, were visibly delighted. They explained to her that Gato had been quietly encroaching on the borders of their businesses, gradually expanding his reach and using questionable strategies to grow his influence. At first, they were momentarily relieved when he turned his attention toward the Land of Waves. They didn't understand why he would abandon his other ventures to focus so heavily on one area, but they assumed it would buy them some time. However, it quickly became clear that this shift in focus was temporary, and it was only a matter of time before Gato's ambitions returned to affect them. So, when they heard that Gato's companies had changed hands, it was some of the best news they'd received in quite a while. Motivated by this turn of events, they pushed forward to finalize their merger so they could begin working with Tsunami before another opportunity slipped away. In gratitude for what Naruko had unintentionally helped accomplish, Hiro offered her a scroll from his personal collection. Naruko politely declined at first, saying she had only done what she believed was right, but Hiro insisted. Her refusal was cut short when they reached the library and Hiro revealed a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. As he opened it, Naruko paused mid-signing, a subtle pulse in her arm distracting her. She held it carefully, and Tsunade looked at her with concern. Before Tsunade could speak, Hiro turned around holding a scroll that made everyone pause. It was enormous, about 4 feet long, and wrapped in a deep royal blue fabric with intricate gold patterns. A seal shaped like a swirling sun held it closed. Tsunade's eyes widened instantly in recognition. As you may know, I once had a strong interest in collecting rare items, Hiro explained. I came across this scroll over 30 years ago through some unusual and risky trades. Despite all my efforts, and even hiring professionals, no one has been able to unlock its seal. Whoever created it clearly didn't want just anyone opening it. But when I saw the same symbol on your sword hilt, I had a feeling this scroll belongs with you rather than gathering dust in my library. Naruko accepted the scroll and bowed gratefully. She had recently talked with Tsunade about the idea of signing the slug summoning contract, but it hadn't felt right. This scroll, however, almost seemed to resonate with her, as though it was waiting for her. Naru-chan, it's probably best to wait until we're somewhere more private, Tsunade advised gently. Naruko nodded and safely sealed the scroll into one of the many storage compartments she kept with her. Smiling, she bowed once again to Hiro, and together they returned to the meeting room. I've found something. Tsunade called for a stop, and Naruko and Kurotsuchi immediately paused, hearing Anko's excited voice from a nearby window. A week had passed since Naruko had received the scroll. The more she thought about it, the more she was convinced she should wait before signing it. If it connected to something as powerful as she suspected, testing it in their client's mansion wouldn't be a wise choice. So, they had agreed to delay until they returned to Konoha. At the moment, they stood with Han and the rest of his team, examining the remaining seal they had been tracking. They had been disappointed when the mysterious figure one of their teams encountered was apparently defeated by another agent just a few days earlier. Though he had provided little explanation, their best guess was that he considered his injured associate a risk and decided to handle the situation himself before their next move. What is it? Tsunade asked. The leader has arrived early, Anko reported, and our contact has been called to meet with her. They listened closely. The quiet rustle of fabric signaled someone entering a nearby tent. Kurakawa-sama, you're early. The voice belonged to the agent they had been tracking. Despite its soft tone, it carried a touch of pride. It was the first time any of them had heard her speak, as she was known to keep to herself. They had only ever managed to overhear occasional chatter about her from other members of the group. Our client was eager for an update, Fukase, a deep and composed voice, presumably Kurakawa, responded. I followed your instructions, Fukase answered. I approached the shinobi guarding the estate and placed the transportation seal in the target location. Once our team is in position, accessing the grounds will be simple. And your associate? Asked a third voice, a calm, whispering tone that clearly belonged to a woman. She created a distraction, allowing the seal to be placed undetected, Fukase replied. And where is she now? Fukase's smirk could almost be heard in her voice. She was injured. Sometimes it's necessary to adapt and prioritize efficiency. Tsunade felt uneasy. Something in Fukase's tone felt far too casual for the situation. The third woman seemed unimpressed and turned to address Kurakawa again. I've heard enough. I'll accompany you tonight to observe the Five Tails Jinchuriki personally. Footsteps followed her exit, though she paused as Kurakawa called out. And the compensation, Konan? You'll receive payment once everything is completed, she responded. Tsunade frowned, puzzled by the familiar name. Before she could dwell on it, Naruko tugged at her sleeve and began signing. My clones found the seal. It's a highly advanced summoning array that can transport anyone standing in a matching formation across any distance. Tsunade nodded and relayed the message to the rest of the group. She set aside her concerns and focused on the mission at hand. Can you disarm it? She asked. Naruko smiled with a spark of confidence. I can do something even better. The rest of the day passed in quiet anticipation as everyone prepared for the upcoming mission. Naruko had been adjusting the seal that Fukase had left behind, though she didn't offer many details about what would happen to anyone who attempted to use it to enter the mansion uninvited. The other Genin focused on readying their defenses in case any intruders arrived, while Anko, Han, Guy, Tsunade, and Naruko made plans to infiltrate the opposing camp through a carefully replicated seal that Naruko had designed. As night fell and their final preparations concluded, the team assembled atop Naruko's seal. Anko was taken aback by how quickly the transition occurred. One moment they were standing inside the mansion, and the next, the familiar sensation of chakra movement told her that Naruko's seal had transported them successfully. They arrived on a matching seal near the edge of the enemy encampment. She and Guy immediately subdued the two startled guards without raising any alarm, while Naruko summoned a team of shadow clones. These clones took the form of various forest animals and quickly disappeared into the trees to observe the camp. Only minutes later, a puff of smoke appeared, and a woman with blue hair and a black cloak collapsed from within. With swift coordination, the team returned to the mansion and placed their unexpected guest in a secure room in the basement. Ooh! Konan stirred as consciousness slowly returned. She vaguely remembered being in her tent, feeling increasingly frustrated about her current assignment. She had hoped another member of her organization would have been chosen to monitor the Five Tails Jinchuriki, especially considering the uncomfortable behavior of those she had to associate with. She was reminding herself to stay focused on her mission when she sensed someone approaching from behind. She turned quickly and landed a blow on her would-be attacker, only for them to vanish in a puff of smoke. Everything after that was a blur. Now, she found herself lying in what looked like a storage room. Though she couldn't move and her ability to use chakra had been sealed, her mind remained sharp. The door opened, and 3 people entered. She recognized the first instantly, Orochimaru's former student. They had monitored this kunoichi after she defected from her previous affiliations. The second woman was someone from Konan's distant past, Tsunade Senju, once known across the nations as a powerful figure in the Hidden Leaf. The third was unfamiliar. A girl, no taller than 5 feet, with unruly blonde hair and captivating blue eyes that held an unusual mix of intensity and compassion. "So, you're finally awake," Anko said, standing confidently near Naruko. "It wasn't the wisest decision to capture me," Konan replied calmly. "And it wasn't exactly wise to let yourself be caught," Anko responded. "You've been unconscious for a couple of days. Your little group scattered when they realized their plans weren't working, and the person they were depending on had vanished. I'd say that's not the impression you want to leave." "The mercenaries mean nothing to me," Konan stated. "They were just a tool to reach my objective." Naruko's gaze sharpened. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important was right in front of her, just waiting to be understood. Anko exhaled slowly. "That's actually a relief. I was almost worried someone would come looking for you. Now, usually this would be the part where someone might get pushy for answers, but you seem like someone who appreciates directness." She pulled out a scroll and unsealed a variety of items onto the table. "With everyone else out of the mansion right now, that means we have a bit of privacy to talk things through." Konan kept her face calm, though she was already preparing herself mentally. She wasn't going to reveal anything about her group, no matter how persuasive her captors might be. But even as she steeled her will, she found herself drawn again to the clear blue gaze of the young kunoichi before her, Naruko. There was something about those eyes that reminded her of a long-lost friend. A spark of hope. A glimpse of something better. As if on cue, Naruko flinched slightly and instinctively channeled chakra into her eyes. The stinging sensation vanished, replaced by a dull pressure in her head. "Well done," came a calm voice from within. "Looks like you've unlocked the next stage of your visual ability," the Kyuubi murmured as Naruko processed the influx of sensory information. "Wait," Naruko said softly. Anko paused, glancing at her with surprise. Naruko's eyes now glowed with a new intensity, a single glowing triangle spinning within each iris. She stepped closer to Konan and sat down across from her, her enhanced gaze unwavering. "What is your organization trying to accomplish?" Naruko asked gently. Konan raised a brow. "What makes you think I'm part of one?" "You said it was a mistake for us to capture you," Naruko replied. "Which means someone else would be upset we did. Add to that the distinct cloak you wore, it looked like part of a uniform, and it's not a stretch to assume you belong to a group." Konan was impressed despite herself. "That's quite an observation for someone so young." "You're impressive, too," Naruko said, her tone sincere. "Most people don't come up with abilities as rare and refined as yours. I bet your team values you a lot." With her enhanced sight, Naruko was able to track the smallest shifts in Konan's expressions and posture, giving her insights into what the woman might be thinking. She continued speaking calmly, choosing her words with care. You think your organization's goals are too complex for others to understand. That suggests they're ambitious, maybe even world-changing. Given your age and experience, I'd guess you grew up during conflict and saw firsthand what war can do. Maybe that's why you think your group's actions are justified. Let me guess, your group wants peace. Conan's expression faltered for a moment, her surprise evident. You're not wrong, she admitted. But you're also not entirely right. She sat up straighter, her voice steady. I don't believe Akatsuki will bring peace, I know it will. Tsunade stepped in gently. And what does the Five Tails Jinchuriki have to do with that piece? She's just a piece in a larger plan, Conan answered carefully. So you're after the tailed beasts, Naruko said softly, her eyes filled not with accusation, but with sadness. But that won't bring the peace you're looking for. Conan tilted her head, curious. You don't know enough about Akatsuki to say that. Naruko shook her head. I believe your members are powerful. I believe they're committed. But your method won't lead to the world you're hoping for. Conan's voice trembled slightly. You haven't seen the kind of loss that shapes convictions like ours. You haven't experienced true sorrow. Only those who have can understand the path to peace. Naruko stood up quietly, her voice kind. That's where you're wrong. I know enough to see the value of peace, and I'll find a better way to protect it. Tsunade and Anko followed her out, both still stunned by how much Naruko had learned in such a short time. Just as the door closed behind them, Naruko wavered and nearly collapsed. Anko caught her gently as her eyes returned to normal. Didn't think asking questions could be so exhausting, Naruko murmured as she lost consciousness. Tsunade quickly examined her with a diagnostic technique and nodded. Just chakra exhaustion. Whatever she activated in there used an incredible amount of energy. Anko carefully picked her up. What did she do? Tsunade shook her head. I honestly don't know. Naruko woke up the next morning with one goal in mind, she wanted to see Conan again. Tsunade and Anko were hesitant about the idea but agreed, on the condition that she wouldn't use her Kunshugen the way she had the day before. Naruko promised, and the group made their way back to the lower level, stopping in the kitchen to grab a tray of food. Conan stirred when the door to her temporary room opened and her visitors returned. She blinked in surprise as Naruko stepped forward, gently setting a plate of warm, appetizing food in front of her. With a simple hand sign, Naruko activated a seal that allowed Conan to move her arms freely. Go ahead and eat, Naruko encouraged with a gentle nod. Conan looked at her warily, unsure of the gesture. Naruko gave a small, amused sigh and leaned in, playfully taking a bite of the eggs from Conan's plate. Then she leaned back, eyes flicking between Conan and the food until Conan finally picked up her fork and tasted it herself, following it with a slice of orange. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, Naruko said quietly. Her voice sounded more hushed than usual, softer and thoughtful. Maybe you had a point. Everyone in the room seemed taken aback as they watched her sit quietly at the edge of the table, her eyes resting on her hands with an unusual calm. Maybe, in order to truly understand peace, you have to understand what it feels like to struggle. She reached for her scarf and began to loosen it. Tsunade stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder, her face filled with concern. Are you sure about this, Naruko? Naruko gave a small, bittersweet smile and nodded. Conan watched silently as Naruko removed the scarf, revealing a long, faded scar along her throat. Then, with a steady breath, she took off both her hoodie and undershirt. Anko covered her mouth, her eyes misting over at the sight of the many scars that marked Naruko's body. Even Ibiki, known for her resilience, had never looked this worn. But what caught everyone's attention the most was the strange dark metal of Naruko's right arm. Despite the pain these marks suggested, her eyes still held a steady, bright determination. Naruko quietly put her clothes back on, her message clear without words. We're taking you back to Konoha, she said gently. You have a choice, spend your days in a holding cell, or show the Hokage that you want to help, and that you can make a difference. With that, she turned and walked out, Tsunade and Anko following behind. Once outside, Anko wrapped her arms around Naruko in a tight embrace. They didn't exchange words, but the warmth in Anko's hug said enough. Naruko gently returned the hug, running her hand across Anko's back before looking at her mentor. Let's go home. Tsunade and Naruko were in a quiet clearing about half a day's journey from Konoha. Their mission had been completed, and Anko, though somewhat reluctant, had returned to the village with their captive. Meanwhile, the two had sought a secluded area to try out a unique summoning contract. Given how some villagers still misunderstood Naruko, it was best to keep her developing abilities a secret, especially since this particular contract had divine origins. They both agreed that the council didn't need to know, at least not yet, as some members might try to take advantage of her newfound power. Tsunade had walked Naruko through the process, showing her how to sign the contract, perform the necessary hand seals, and summon a creature. To demonstrate, she called forth a small slug, about the size of a dog. Naruko's eyes glowed with her activated Kunshugen, carefully observing how chakra was molded and released. The Kunshugen hadn't reverted since the last time it evolved. One elegant spike still hovered lazily around her swirling iris. Tsunade theorized that, like other advanced dojutsu, more features would likely appear as Naruko's skills continued to grow. Thankfully, the unusual effects seen during their previous interrogation appeared to be another ability rather than a permanent change, possibly a powerful tool for gathering information, considering how easily it had persuaded a notorious individual to share details. Naruko nodded in understanding, then focused. She bit her thumb lightly, performed the seals, and pressed her hand to the ground. A puff of smoke followed, revealing a creature that even caught Tsunade by surprise. Standing in front of them was a reptilian being, only slightly larger than the slug Tsunade had summoned. It stood upright on strong hind legs, with arms hanging comfortably at its sides. The creature was dressed in armor reminiscent of old samurai styles, covering its back and shoulders. The plates were dark and scale-like, adorned with purple-tipped spikes, giving it a majestic, ancient feel. A samurai helmet with golden flame motifs decorated its head, shielding two slender horns. Beneath the armor, shimmering golden scales covered its frame, and its bright green eyes scanned the area with sharp intelligence. When it spoke, its voice was bold yet playful. "All right, who's the one who called me here?" Its eyes narrowed at Tsunade, though the tone remained light. "Was it you, ma'am? You seem strong, but you're definitely not the one Lady Amaterasu mentioned." Tsunade raised an eyebrow, brushing off the implied comment about her age. "Nope. Not me. I think you're looking for someone else." "Ha. Figures," the reptile laughed. "Name's Ryuta. Someday, I'm going to be the leader of the Dragon Clan." There was a certain charm in the way she announced it, full of ambition, confidence, and youthful energy. It reminded Tsunade of someone she knew very well. Ryuta spun around as she sensed someone behind her and came face to face with Naruko, who greeted her with an enthusiastic wave. The dragon's expression softened with curiosity. "So you're the one, huh?" Naruko nodded and extended a hand. Ryuta responded with a clawed one, and a flash of light passed between them as their hands met. Naruko was gently pushed back a few steps, landing softly, a bit surprised but unhurt. Ryuta seemed thoughtful for a moment before making a cheerful declaration. "All right, Naruko, I had a quick peek into your thoughts, chatted with your parent for a moment, and I've decided, we're going to be best friends." "Really?" Naruko signed excitedly. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll be sticking around as your companion and training partner." Ryuta grinned. "My folks say I need more experience, and what better way than to explore the world with my new summoner." "So Naruko can summon other dragons too?" Tsunade asked curiously. "Absolutely," Ryuta replied. "Though not all of them are as stylish or friendly as me. Some might take a little convincing before they'll agree to team up with you." Naruko's eyes sparkled as she signed again. "So, we're really friends now?" Ryuta nodded with a playful grin. "Even better, I'll be like your sister. I've got your back from now on. I'll help you train and be there for every challenge." Naruko bounced happily on her toes, overjoyed, while Tsunade quietly wondered how the villagers would react when they saw Naruko walking around with a dragon companion. It was clear from Ryuta's protective posture that she cared deeply about Naruko's safety, but like many summons, that loyalty likely didn't extend to others outside their bond. Still, Tsunade set those thoughts aside for the moment, not wanting to dampen Naruko's joy. When they returned to Konoha, Naruko practically glowed with happiness. Tsunade left to deliver her mission report, while Naruko and Ryuta headed for Training Ground 8, where she expected to find her friends, and maybe even Haku and Zabuza. Their timing was perfect. From a branch overhead, Naruko saw Hinata, Kiba, and Shino training with the gifts she had given them. Haku was nearby, practicing her ice techniques, and even Zabuza was sparring with Kurenai using a practice blade to help her with her skills. "These your friends?" Ryuta asked. Naruko nodded proudly as she watched the matches. She and Ryuta leapt down, announcing their presence with cheerful energy. Hinata and Haku rushed over, hugging Naruko tightly, laughing and welcoming her back. Naruko beamed, returning the affection and exchanging a happy look with Kurenai, whose heart swelled at the sight. "Wow, sis, I get it now," Ryuta said, smiling as she observed the bonds Naruko shared. Everyone turned to the unfamiliar voice, eyes widening at the sight of the armored dragon standing proudly beside Naruko. Ryuta cheerfully introduced herself, answering questions and chatting with ease. But suddenly, an unexpected visitor appeared in a swirl of leaves. Ryuta acted instantly, spinning around and lightly pinning the figure to the ground with her tail before realizing it was not a threat. Naruko stepped in calmly, placing a hand on Ryuta's shoulder. The newcomer was an Anbu operative who had previously summoned her to meet with the village council. He stood and passed on his message before departing. "Go on," Kurenai said kindly. "We'll be here when you get back. And you can tell us all about what happened," Haku added with a smile. "Good luck, Naruko-chan," Hinata whispered, her cheeks turning pink. Naruko looked down at Ryuta and saw the encouragement in her companion's eyes. Together, they hurried back toward the heart of the village, bounding across rooftops toward the Hokage Tower. Within minutes, they reached the large doors of the council chambers. Naruko took a deep breath, exchanged a reassuring glance with Ryuta, and stepped forward. The room fell silent as she entered, though the moment didn't last. Murmurs resumed when the council noticed she wasn't alone. "This is not a place for animals, young lady," Homura stated coldly, earning several nods from other council members. The tension quickly shifted when Ryuta vanished from Naruko's side and reappeared on the table in front of the elder, his presence intense as he spoke calmly but firmly. "I'd advise more respectful language. Even summoned creatures prefer to be addressed properly." He returned to Naruko's side in an instant as Hiruzen cleared his throat, visibly amused but maintaining composure. "So Tsunade wasn't exaggerating when she mentioned you had formed a familiar bond," the Hokage said, eyes twinkling. Naruko smiled. "That's right. This is Ryuta." She signed confidently, while Ryuta, ever helpful, translated for her. "At least this means Tsunade-sama will have more time for other matters," a council member muttered under his breath. Hiruzen ignored the comment, focusing instead on Ryuta. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ryuta." Ryuta gave a toothy grin. "The pleasure is all mine, Grandpa." "Uzumaki, please remind your familiar to speak respectfully to the Hokage and this council," Hyuga said with an edge of formality. "Hey, who are you calling a lizard, sparkly eyes?" Ryuta responded, frowning. "I'm the future leader of the dragon summons, and I'm being very polite, considering." Naruko gave a small sigh while Tsunade, nearby, lowered her head and sighed too, clearly familiar with Ryuta's bold personality. "There are no dragons, let alone summoning contracts with them," Councilwoman Haruno exclaimed. "Would you like a demonstration?" Ryuta shot back with a cheeky smirk. "That's enough," the Hokage's calm voice cut through the room, stilling the conversation. "Hokage-sama, if I may," Danzo interjected. "Regardless of what the creature is, Konoha law dictates that summoning contracts not belonging to clans must be made accessible to other shinobi. If you think for even a second that anyone else is going to sign our contract," Ryuta began, but Naruko gently placed a hand on his shoulder, and he stopped. She smiled and pulled out the dragon scroll, tossing it to Danzo. "There you go, Danzo-san," Ryuta translated her signed message. "You'll likely find it as inaccessible as you did when trying to replicate the Kunshugen." Danzo frowned and struggled with the sun-shaped seal on the scroll, clearly unable to open it. "The man who gave the scroll to Naruko mentioned that several experts failed to open it," Tsunade said with a small smirk. "It only responds to those who possess the Kunshugen." "Was there another reason you summoned us, Hokage-sama?" Naruko asked through Ryuta. Hiruzen nodded. "Jonin Mitarashi returned a few days ago with a prisoner. She reported that the prisoner is part of an organization called the Akatsuki and that their aim is connected to the tailed beasts. Do you have anything to add to that report?" Naruko thought for a moment, then signed carefully. "Nothing significant, Hokage-sama." She mostly spoke in vague philosophical terms during the interrogations. "And might this so-called philosophy be the reason she refuses to speak with anyone except you and Anko-san?" Hiruzen continued. "She and I discussed ideas during the times we interacted," Naruko responded via Ryuta. "You expect us to believe that a Genin with the lowest marks in the academy debated with a high-level rogue ninja and kept our village's secrets safe?" Hyashi asked skeptically. "It does sound improbable," Inoiki added thoughtfully. "She probably turned her into a secret ally," Councilman Sanjuro accused harshly. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and allowed a firm aura to rise around her, quiet but unmistakable. "Careful with those accusations, Councilman. I was present during every interrogation. Naruko never revealed any confidential information." "Tsunade-sama, as was clarified last time, While you may attend these sessions, you may not voice opinions unless addressed directly, Danzo said, a hint of smugness in his tone. Then it's fortunate Naruko has a familiar who can speak on her behalf, Ryuta said quickly. And I'm not bound by your village protocols. Naruko signed again, and Ryuta translated. And as the last known member of the Senju clan, Naruko deserves the same say in council matters as any other shinobi representative. I think we've heard enough of this unnecessary suspicion, Hiruzen said, tone growing firm. Naruko, the reason I asked about your conversations was because the prisoner. Konan, Naruko interjected. Yes, Konan has agreed to share everything she knows about her organization, but only if she can speak directly with you, the Hokage said calmly. Naruko took a thoughtful pause, considering how best to approach the situation. I'll agree to meet her, but only if it's just you, Suna-sensei, and Anko-chan in the room, and nothing we say is recorded or shared outside. Hiruzen silently weighed the terms, ignoring the protest from the council members. After a long moment, he nodded and rose from his seat. He gently placed his hands on Naruko and Ryuta's shoulders and transported them instantly to the T&I facility using a teleportation technique. They moved swiftly through the halls, joined by Tsunade, brushing off the curious looks, especially those directed at Ryuta, as they made their way deeper into the secured area. They stopped in front of a room where Konan was being held. Eviki quietly let them in before Hiruzen dismissed him. Anko was already inside, and she gave a small smile as Naruko entered. Konan's curious gaze shifted from Tsunade and the Hokage to Naruko and the armored figure beside her. Hello, Konan, Naruko greeted warmly. This is Ryuta. He'll help interpret if needed. Konan gave a respectful nod to Ryuta before addressing Naruko. So, you've heard my proposal? Yup, Naruko replied with a playful smile and a quick wink. For a moment, Konan felt a flutter of warmth in her chest before Naruko turned back to Hiruzen. I'm ready, Gigi. What do you mean? Tsunade asked in disbelief. You just said you'd talk to Konan if your conditions were met. And I did talk to her, Naruko answered calmly. But if you want a real conversation, I have a few more requests now that there are no recordings. Hiruzen chuckled heartily. You always manage to surprise me, Naruko. Alright, let's hear what you have in mind. He smiled, amused by her cleverness rather than frustrated. Naruko quickly signed her new conditions while Ryuta remained quiet to avoid tipping off Konan. After a silent exchange of glances between Tsunade and Hiruzen, they both gave hesitant nods. Alright, Hiruzen said, but if anything goes wrong, even I might not be able to help. Naruko gave a grateful nod and turned her attention back to Konan. So, what did you want to share with me? Konan took a deep breath, focusing on Naruko's eyes. There was something gentle yet determined in them that made her feel safe. Last time we spoke, you asked me to prove my value to your village. I intend to do that. How? Naruko asked, her tone calm but focused. I'll give you information about Akatsuki, the members, our goals. In exchange, I want to be released. Naruko frowned. She carefully reviewed everything her special insight had revealed to her the last time they met. I can't agree to that. Konan's brows furrowed. Why not? For several reasons, Naruko replied. The biggest one being that I'm not going to let someone who still has good in her heart walk away into danger. What do you mean? Konan asked softly. From what I understand, Akatsuki was once about peace. But it's changed. Now it's about capturing Jinchuriki to create a tool of power under the illusion of creating harmony. I think you've been part of it since the beginning. And I think you've seen that change too. Konan looked away, uncomfortable at how easily Naruko had understood her. But after a long silence, she sighed. Yahiko, Nagato, and I founded Akatsuki to protect the oppressed. We wanted peace. But we were betrayed. Hanzo tricked us, ambushed us. Yahiko gave himself up so Nagato and I could live. After that, Nagato changed. He believed the only way to peace was through overwhelming strength, strength no one would dare oppose. He became someone else. Someone we began calling pain. Naruko listened quietly, empathizing. She understood how power could feel like the only answer when no one else listened. You really do want peace, Naruko said gently. But if that's true, why did you involve the Wandering Clan in a way that framed Han Ni? That doesn't sound like peace. That wasn't part of my plan, Konan replied, surprised. I only wanted access to the Five Tails Jinchuriki. Someone else must have twisted things further. Naruko took a deep breath. All right then, how about this? You tell the Hokage everything you know, and in return, instead of remaining locked away, you'll stay under my watch. Your chakra will still be sealed and you'll be supervised, but at least you'll have some freedom. Why would you offer me that? Konan asked, genuinely confused. You barely know me, and I was considered a threat. Because I believe in second chances, Naruko replied sincerely. And maybe I could use your help for something else too. Ooh. Konan accepted the arrangement, and within a week, she moved into Naruko's apartment. She had given names, locations, and insights into Akatsuki's plans. She didn't know why, but every time she thought about holding back information, Naruko's voice echoed in her mind, a soft promise of trust and safety. She had never been one for confrontation. Her training had been to protect Yahiko and Nagato. Now Yahiko was gone, and Nagato had become distant. The time in isolation had given her space to reflect. Naruko's kindness puzzled her. Now that she was living with Naruko, she hoped to understand it better. Though, calling it living might have been generous. The apartment was in poor condition, peeling paint, cracked windows, no hot water. Naruko showed her to a small bedroom with a mattress on the floor and threadbare blankets. You'll be sleeping here, Naruko said gently. Konan was beginning to get used to her quiet, raspy tone, and strangely, she found it comforting. Are you sure I can't return to my cell? Konan teased lightly. Can I join you? Ryuta added playfully, making her chuckle for the first time in a long while. Naruko laughed softly and retrieved a scroll from her pouch. With a small puff of smoke, a portable stove and food appeared. It's not much, but things are changing soon. Why? Konan asked. I'm being rewarded with land for helping sort through important records, Naruko explained. Konan blinked. Their side mission had turned out to be sorting papers, miles of them, but it didn't explain why Naruko would be given land. It didn't add up, but she set the thought aside as Naruko served her a warm plate of scrambled eggs with crispy strips. As she ate, she looked around the apartment. Everything seemed worn down, even the utensils, which Naruko quickly resealed into the scroll after cleaning them. Why keep all that with you? She asked. Naruko didn't answer, but Ryuta spoke gently. You've seen her scars. Do you think people who cause that kind of pain would hesitate to damage her home, too? Konan looked down, feeling a quiet sadness. A warm hand touched hers, Naruko's smile reminding her that she had asked only out of care. Later, they left for the training field. It was a group day, and Naruko now faced Hinata, Shino, Kiba, and Haku. She focused on practicing her water style, leaving behind her wind training for now. Naruko moved fluidly, flipping Kiba over her shoulder into Hinata, dodging attacks with practiced ease. Shino launched stone spikes while Haku threw frozen senbon. Naruko kept her focus, resisting the urge to return to her more comfortable wind style. She drew her blade, Eclipse, cutting down a spike and redirecting it to block Haku's attack. But her defenses were down, more senbon approached. Acting on instinct, she swung her blade again. This time, dark chakra pulsed from the weapon, releasing delicate crescent-shaped waves that sliced through the incoming projectiles, stopping them mid-air. On the sidelines, Tsunade, Kurenai, Anko, Zabuza, and Konan watched in awe as the crescent chakra shimmered protectively around Naruko. Looks like Eclipse has a water-based form too, Ryuta commented quietly. Naruko stopped the flow of chakra, letting the crescents dissolve peacefully. She turned to Tsunade, awaiting her next instruction. Take a break, everyone. Naruko, same rules apply to this ability as the others. Naruko nodded and helped her friends to their feet. Haku and Hinata sat close to her as she unsealed some ration bars, handing one to each of them before passing others to Anko, Kurenai, and Konan. Kurenai and Anko smiled warmly, while Konan studied the bar with mild curiosity. While we're all gathered, Tsunade said with a kind smile, Kurenai and I have an announcement to make. Kurenai gave a small nod, setting aside the warmth she'd felt when Naruko's hand had brushed hers. She turned to her team with calm seriousness. After much thought, I've nominated you three for the Chunin exams. Team 8 nodded with determination, and Kurenai couldn't help but feel proud of the growth they'd shown. We won't let you down, Kurenai-sensei, Hinata said sincerely. We'll give it everything we've got, Shino added. Yeah, we're going to give it our all and show what we can do. Kiba chimed in with enthusiasm. Tsunade turned to her own student with a fond look. I've also recommended you for the exams, Naruko. If she's interested, Haku may take them with you as your partner. Naruko beamed and turned toward Haku with a hopeful expression. Haku took her hand and nodded, smiling as Naruko jumped up and spun her in a joyful hug, causing her to blush. A few others nearby smiled at the sweet moment. The exams begin in a month, Tsunade continued. That means this will be our final group training session for now. Don't worry, Suna-sensei. Naruko signed confidently. Ryuta, Seki-chan, and I will train our hardest and show everyone what we can do. Tsunade smiled, confident in her students' determination. Well done, kid, Kyubi said warmly. I can't wait to see you shine. Thanks, Dad. I'll make you and Suna-sensei proud, Naruko thought back with a smile. You already have, Kyubi replied. Back in the moment, Naruko quickly finished her meal and returned to training with her friends. The following month was intense, with Tsunade pushing her harder than ever. With guidance from Anko and Haku, she improved her mastery of water-style techniques and chakra control. Zabuza trained with her regularly, helping her combine water and wind styles during their sparring sessions. Konan, slowly growing more comfortable, occasionally offered helpful tips. Naruko often found herself speaking with her over dinner, sharing quiet moments that built a growing sense of trust. One day, after Konan had a troubling encounter with a villager while running errands, Naruko adjusted the seal on her chakra. While still limited, Konan could now use a small portion of her abilities for self-defense. Naruko carefully explained the safeguards, a surveillance seal that would notify the Hokage if she misused her chakra, and a link to the village barrier that would neutralize any threats aimed toward fellow villagers. It wasn't about mistrust, it was about responsibility and protection. Konan understood, even if a small part of her wished the trust between them didn't require such conditions. Now, just 3 days before the exams, Naruko was training alone in Field 43. Tsunade was at the hospital and Haku had gone along, interested in learning medical techniques. Anko was busy, Konan was with Naruko's clones, and Zabuza was away on a mission. She'd just finished sparring with Ryuta and a few clones when she took off her hoodie and undershirt to cool down. A sudden, startled gasp made her turn. Kurenai stood behind her, hands to her mouth, her eyes wide with emotion as they took in the many marks on Naruko's skin. Her gaze settled on Naruko's right arm, the prosthetic one, partially covered with protective plating and advanced, cord-like muscles. I'll let you take this one, Ryuta mumbled before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Kenshi-chan, Naruko whispered gently, the seals on their necks allowing Kurenai to hear her clearly. What happened to you? Kurenai asked softly, stepping forward and reaching toward Naruko's arm. When Naruko flinched slightly, Kurenai paused, but continued when she saw Naruko relax. Her fingers brushed the smooth, cool metal, and the weight of her emotions overwhelmed her. She wrapped Naruko in a gentle hug, and Naruko responded in kind, guiding her to sit beneath a nearby tree. I think you already know, Naruko whispered quietly into her hair.
I want to understand, Kurenai said through trembling lips.
Naruko gently shook her head. Some things only bring more pain if you dig too deep. Instead, let me tell you a story about how I met someone who changed everything for me. She whispered stories of their meetings, their shared laughs and quiet moments. She described how seeing Kurenai's smile gave her strength, how even on the hardest days, that thought kept her going. Kurenai's heart settled as Naruko stroked her back gently, offering her calm through soft words. She watched the intricate movement of the prosthetic arm as it flexed and moved, remarkably human in design, though still mechanical in nature. You know I'll protect them, right? Naruko said quietly. What? Kurenai asked, her voice hazy with emotion and the quiet comfort of the moment. Your team, Naruko explained. You came to ask me to look out for them, didn't you? Kurenai nodded. I know it's not fair to ask you to worry about others during a competition, but... She trailed off as Naruko gently pressed a cool metal finger to her lips. You never had to ask, Naruko said softly. Hinata, Kiba, and Shino. They're important to me too. I'll do my best to keep them safe. Thank you, Naruko, Kurenai whispered. Their faces slowly drew closer, caught in a moment of warmth and mutual trust. As their lips gently met, all the reasons they shouldn't vanished. For a brief moment, it was just them, sharing peace beneath the trees. And that wraps up this part, folks. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care and stay awesome. Regards. Six Path Weeb.